internet connection. If you have an earphone or headset, we recommend you to use it so that your voice can clearly and loudly to be heard. During the Q&A discussion session, all participants, please use the chat box to deliver the questions. Thank you for your cooperation and consideration.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from sunny Surabaya. Welcome to R2SCP Researcher and Research Student Engagement Program by Institut Teknologi 10 November or ITS Surabaya. First of all, how are you? How is it going with you wherever you are?
Fine.
Nice to meet you all, everyone.
All good, thank
In this
you.
occasion. Thank you. Thank you for coming to this event. So, I would like to welcome you to R2SCP. R2SCP has been the primary source for ITS research students to build their research competence and skills. Previously launched in 2018, R2SCP received global attention in 2020 since being converted into an e-program that is open for global citizens. Sorry, my partner is coughing. Oh, but don't worry, we are distance apart, so no problem. So, I would like to tell you that in 2021, we have a new concept of art recipe in this program. Now we offer 4 streams to explore the best research practices, including in hard engineering, soft engineering sciences, and also in architecture, design, social sciences, and urban planning. And R2SCP runs fortnightly for each stream, and it is mandatory for ITS postgraduate students, especially for this year's intake. So be sure to fill in the attendance and also the feedback at the end of this event. If you are PJJ student, distant learning students of ITS, you can also have this session asynchronously. Please visit our website for further information. My partner will drop the link in the chat box. It's its.ac.id/international/e-program/r2sb. Don't worry, we will drop the link to you. And then welcome again to the very first R2SCP in spring 2021, especially for the stream of architecture, urban planning, design, and social sciences. In this very occasion, we invited respected Associate Professor Nur Hazarina Hashim from University Technology Malaysia as the speaker, and also Ms. Fenty Ratna Indarti from ITS Architecture Department as the moderator today. To start the event, I would like to invite Dr. Ardiono Priyadi, the Vice Director of Postgraduate Program and Academic Development of ITS, to give an opening remark. Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Ardiono. Committee, could you please spotlight Dr. Ardiono for us? Hello, Dr. Ardiono, how are you?
Hello. Thank you. Fine.
Thank you for
And how
coming.
are you?
Time is yours, Dr.
Thank you very
Ardiono.
much. Okay.
We're tremendously great. Time is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nasteti. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Miss Nastiti, for yeah. This one today. So welcome. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the speaker, Professor Nur Hazarina Hashim from University Technology Malaysia. So thank you also for all the postgraduate student of ITS and the international student who coming to this program. Also, from all of our friend and all the who provide this program and also arrangement this program. So this program has become nicely. So today's session is the second workshop of the research and researcher student engagement program, or we call this R2SEP program. With the topic is expectation from being a postgraduate student. This session is streaming from architecture, urban planning, design, and also social science. This program aim is to give the student the insight and a knowledgeable experiment from the speaker. So becoming a postgraduate student needs dedication, commitment, and hard work. It is a very useful when student can hear a direct experience from our speaker. So hopefully, so R2SEP program run through one whole semester with the variety of topics and a speaker. So last but and least, so hopefully the program can equip the student with comprehensive understanding of postgraduate student life challenges and how to overcome them. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Adriono, for giving the very remark for today's opening session. So, without further ado, I would like to invite you to the main agenda. But before that, please change your ID into S1, S2, S3, and then underscore your name and also underscore the department you are enrolled or your university. S1 is for bachelor degree and S2 is for master's degree, while S3 is for doctoral degree. Wait a minute, I will. Okay, thank you so much, Agatha. Okay, please kindly change your name into those format. Why? Because it will be nicer for the speaker to know your position so that we can discuss the materials in this event way more comprehensive. I'd appreciate it if you can do it now. So while waiting, I would like to introduce you to Miss Fendi Ratna Indarti, committee. Could you please spotlight Ibu Fendi? Hello, Ibu Fendi.
Oh, hi, Mbak Nastiti.
Hello, Ibu Fendi. It's nice to meet you again. How are you?
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I'm good.
Thank
How are you?
you for pretty great. Thank you for agreeing to be the moderator for today's session.
Mhm.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Ibu Fendi or Miss Fendi is a junior lecturer at ITS Department of Architecture. She graduated from the University of Nottingham, UK. Her research interests includes architectural design method and environmental diversity. To Ibu Fendi, I pass the virtual microphone to you and please start the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manastiti. Good afternoon, everyone who has participated in this event. Before we go to the lecture, I would like to introduce our honorable speaker for today. So, committee, would you mind to, yeah, okay. So thank you. I will read her profile. So there is something blocking the writing. Okay. So she has graduated from the University of Western Australia for her PhD, and then she also graduated from Master of Management Technology in the University Teknologi Malaysia, and she has a Bachelor Business Administration from International Islamic University Malaysia. And now she is an academic. She has several academic and professional experience. She is the chair School of Graduate Studies in the University of Teknologi Malaysia, And then she is also lecturer or researcher in University Technology Malaysia, and she is the academic advisor for international students and exchange students at Faculty of Management UTM. For her research interest and latest project, she is a project leader for the hybrid text mining approach for analyzing textual descriptions of tourist feeling and experience to smart destination management. She expertised on marketing, internet marketing, and also destination marketing. And she also become the project leader of hashtag on Instagram. What do they say about our food? Based on this profile, we see that she has a very interesting background. I would like to invite Professor Nur Hazarina.
Hi everyone, I'm here.
Okay. Now I can see you. Good afternoon, Professor Nur Hazarina.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so I think from your profile background, we are curious about the lecture today, and we are really waiting for your lecture. So I think I will give you the time now. I think it's still mute, Professor. Sorry, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think you can see my slide.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to everyone. It's almost 5 o'clock here in Malaysia, right? And I probably have about 1 hour to share my experience with you. The topics actually attracts me because I'm currently the chair, or perhaps a common term is the dean of School of Graduate Study in my university, where I have a total of almost 8,000 postgraduate students in my university that I handle. So I would like to share with you some of the expectations that we have, some of the tricks, the do and the don'ts, right, of becoming a postgraduate student. So I was being informed that the participants for this evening are mostly the postgraduate students. So I do hope that from the slide that I have prepared, along with some of my experience handling postgraduate students, it could bring benefits to you, and hopefully you will be able to graduate your postgraduate studies with flying colors and on time. All right. So this is the title of my presentation. I have around 30 over slides to share with you. Okay, let me begin with the scenario. Now, what you see here is a machine, all right? And I call it a PhD machine. And a machine needs an engine, all right? And in a PhD, you got no one else besides you as the engine. So you are basically the one who are being able to basically not only PhD, perhaps a master by research or even master by taught course. You're the only one to drive this, because compared to your undergraduate study, you usually have like your what you call advisor, right? Your academic advisor to assist and to guide you of what subject to take, how do you calculate your CGPA, and so on. But in a postgraduate study, it's totally different, because we expect students who enroll in a postgraduate study are mature students, right? So they will be the one who handles themselves. You would be expected to know what subject to enroll, how to calculate your CGPA, what topic are you going to pursue for your master research or project. So it's the engine in which you are the pilot and no one else. So what you need to do is basically to take the whole responsibility and to carry on with the journey. And how fast or how slow the journey is would depends on your ability to identify some of the hiccups, some of the challenge earlier, so that your journey will be a smooth sailing one. All right. Now, I always tell my students about this graph, which I quote from a presentation as I stated below. Right. I like this graph a lot. Technically, the graph is showing an x and a y axis. The y axis is the semester or the time period that usually students have. right? A PhD degree might take 8, 7, 6 years depending on an institution. For example, in my institution, the maximum numbers of years for a PhD study is 8 years or 16 semester. All right, a master is a maximum of eight semester or 4 years, right? So in this graph, what is showing is that you have an x and a y axis. The y axis is showing the time period that you have in your study, all right, and the level of the x axis is the reading and the levels of confusion that you have, right? So as you can see at the beginning, the red line is where a lot of students are very confused. Well, that's not something abnormal. It's something very normal that when you started your journey, your postgraduate journey, you perhaps are a bit clueless, right? Particularly those who embark in research journey, you will probably be you feel that very overwhelmed because there are just so many things to read. So that is absolutely normal. But this thing can't stay forever. You need to quickly cope up with it. So as you can see in the red line, your confusion should basically decline over the period of studies, right? And the eighth semester is usually the fourth year of the study. We would expect that to settle, and you should have at least a clear idea about what your research is all about. That is where when somebody asks you, could you please tell me about your research? You can, right, snap it and you can just tell, I'm doing a research on this, I found this, and this is what I'm going to share and improve the world, for example, right? So the confusion should settle, and it's okay to be in highly confused state at the beginning of your study, but not to stay there forever, right? And so if you can see that the confusion, right, varies from one individual to another individual, but usually it's high level of confusion throughout your study. Why? Because in every part of the research you will encounter new process. You will have to do the problem formulations, you will have to dig the literature review and find the gap, you would have to explore new methods and swim with the data that you have, and finally draw conclusions in your research project. So throughout here, it's actually a challenging time where confusion oftentimes happens, but there is up and down. So if you can see that the graph, there is up and downs, right? So what happened here is that when before the peak, right, before any peak, you would usually expect you're going to do a lot of reading. Lots of readings needs to happen. And this is where also if you are in your science study where you do lots of experiment, and most of the time the experiment fails, right? Now at the peak of the graph is where you already know and quite firm with the area that you're doing, right? And you would usually know what are the prominent paper in your field, all right? For example, if I'm doing my area in research on internet marketing, some of the area of that I'm looking paper that I can snap it and I can remember you should read this paper is a paper of Flow by Csikszentmihalyi. So this is where you should have a high command of the area. And finally, once you move down or across the peak, right? After the peak is where you would have to do a lots of writing for your thesis. So as you can see, the momentum, all right, the momentum will decrease because the confusion should settle, right, at the end of the process. Now, the tail, the long tail here would depends on how long you take in writing. Well, in my experience, a lot of students would have settled their confusion or data analysis, the confusion about the topic, the data collections. But what heck the students towards the end is the process of writing. In most cases, I would see procrastination or improper management of data, right, that hampers the students from completing their writing on time. So I would advise you to, if you're doing a research or you're doing your master project, write every day, although it's a small paragraph. That will keep your momentum going, right? Okay, so that's an overview about the scenario of a PhD or research students ecosystem, all right? And I think the first important things that a lot of students need to understand is that to find a research topic that you and your supervisors are interested with, all right, which mean in their area of expertise. Well, topic might slightly differ, but the area of interest and expertise might help, right? Might help. You might find an area of common interest. That is very important. And also another thing I would like to advise you to find an area where a not too mature area, or not too immature area. Well, each of these has its own dark, sidekick or dark side, right? When the area is too mature, for example, if you are selecting a theory that has been used many times, all right? Let me quote a very favorite theory that has become a favorite among PhD or master by research student, and I would obviously say no if you come up to me and say this theory of TPB or theory of planned behavior. If you are in the marketing field, you should know this theory, right? This theory has reached to, I would say, saturated, stagnant, where contribution could be very difficult to dig in, right? So then become a challenge when you wanted to write a thesis. You need to come up with a contribution, right, of your study. And when you are working in an area where that is too mature, the area, right, or the scope of contribution becomes a challenge because there's so many research being done in that area, right? Uh, and the in contrast, it could be also a problem, but not as much problem if I would say if you're working in an immature area, right? An immature area means it's totally new, right? For example, those who are working in COVID-19, those who are working on the well-being of frontliners during this COVID-19. This is an immature area, right? Or when you're the people in the medical fields are now working hard in the literature on related to vaccinations in COVID-19. So this is a mature area. The problem with conducting research in immature area is that you have limited literature, right? You would have a limited literature. And now I'm sharing with you this site. It's called lens.org. And it's a site that is being used by the Ministry of Education Malaysia in determining the area for research grant application. So I'm just going to stop sharing this screen and I'm just going to go to this page. It's called the lens.org. Okay. All right. Now, if you can see here, this is the site called lens.org. All right. And in Malaysia, we use this page or this website as a source where we can get some overview about the status of research in this area. So, as an examiner of research grant at the Malaysian Higher Education Institution, we use this and we use this to justify whether the topic is a valid topic for a research grant by the government. So, what you can do is, for example, if I wanted to study on destination tourism, destination marketing, right? And I could just type there and it will give me results, and what it will give you result, and what I wanted to know is that how many people are working in this area. So there is a total of 13,000, all right, literature, documents, paper that is being produced in this area. So it's quite a lot area, and we want to move to, just going to move here. Right, we want to look at this graph bar, which is telling you about the work that has been conducted in this area. So you can see that this is an increasing trend, and it's a lot of number of papers or documents being published in a year related to this topic, right? And we can know that who are the prominent authors that are working in this area, right? And which country is basically dominating research in this area. So you can see that Steve Pike, Daniel Mayer, which is in the US. Similar, Alistair Morrison is in the US, and Dimitrios Pahalis is in UK. So, as a research student, if like I mentioned just now, you should be very well versed on the experts in your area. So this platform gives you an overview about these are the people who are working very closely in this area. Now, having to say that, you can see that, okay, so this quite number of people who are working in this area, right? There's almost 200,000 of citations being conducted in this area, and over 13,232 work, scholarly work is being produced in this area. Now, let us look at example where that's not much research being conducted, certain topic. For example, if I'm looking at selfie in tourism, right? It's an emerging area. Not many people are doing this, right? Um, so you can see there's only 63 works being done, and quite a number of people from Indonesia are working. People from Indonesia are working in this area. So if you look at the statistics, right, number of work being produced, it's also very little. So this lens.org is a platform that I would recommend you if you want to get a feeling about how your area is working, right? This would be a good start, just to get a feeling about where and what is the status, who are the prominent researcher in this area. So you can start by here, right? So this is lens.org, which I think of it is a very good platform, and a research student should know. All right. Now coming back to my slide, so this is what lens just now that I've shown to you. Now these are the four elements that I would like to discuss this evening. All right, and I'm going to focus my presentation on the four elements here. So these are the four elements in the postgraduate study that you do not have while you were studying your undergraduate, right? And you would have to master this skill. All right, the first skills is the reading skills, and I'm talking about read a lot of reading, and not only that you have to read a lot, but you need to have a the skill of to be able to explain, the skill of to be able to criticize the previous work. And when I say criticize, it's not to criticize or condemn on negative critiques. Is a constructive critics, where at the end of your research, you would suggest some recommendation to improve the previous work. So that is where the word literature review comes in a thesis, right? You should be able to understand, to explain, to criticize, and at the end of the day, to give a constructive recommendations on how to overcome the limitation of the previous study. All right. The second item is related to data collection and also field work. Now, we don't do this very much during the undergraduates, right? During the undergraduate, we'll probably do a survey amongst our class, our students in class, or amongst our friend, and then amongst our friends in the class or in the college, right? But this is not the case where you're doing in a postgraduate study, right? You should be able to collect the data from the people, right? And again, to be able to explain why this data is being collected, right, in the field using the populations and so on. Right. And finally, the thirdly is publications, right? Publication could probably be the university's requirement. For example, in UTM, we have publication requirement for submitting thesis, right? And it is also a scholarly requirement, right? In our field, we would expect that students to be able to publish their work, okay, so that you could be in the line with other scholars in your area. And finally, is that you should be able to do networking, just like what you had this at the moment, that you are networking with probably people outside your university, within Indonesia, or even at the international level. So you can speak with the researcher within the field in your area, right? And networking is also important for you to build your interpersonal skills. So this is where you get along with people from other culture, from other countries, right? So this is where networking kicks in. Right. Like I mentioned just now, we'll go one by one on the four elements. Let me go to the first element, which is reading. Right? So, reading is very essential in a postgraduate study, and we expect you to read high quality papers, which means that you should be able to identify the top venues or the top journal in your field. So lens will help because it will tell us, and also the knowledge of scientific database such as Scopus, Web of Science, Q1, Q2 is very essential, which I think your universities will help you. All right, the library will help you in giving an overall idea about this different publication database. All right, so read from top venues, all right, from high rank journal, and also read from top researcher in your field. All right, so there must be some prominent researcher in your field. So you must be able to read and to cite some of the paper from the prominent researcher in your field. And finally, you should be able to follow the citations, right? And also read some of the related papers in the area. Well, I would always recommend my students to, after reading, right, to do a summary, not to copy, all right, from the paper, but you close the paper and write in your own words what is the summary that you can get, or what are the things that you get from the paper, right? So this is I have basically delivered a talk on how to read successfully in my university last 2 years, and I gave them a few six or five steps on how to read a research paper. Well, there are five steps that you need to know when you want to read a research paper. You know, I understand being a PhD students or research students or a taught course or mixed mode students who are working in a project, we have one hobby. You know what's our hobby for research students? We like to download paper and print papers. And then it becomes a compilation or bulk of paper on on our table, and then we start to get panic. Am I right? So that's usually happen. It happen across the world. All right, it's a disease for all the PhDs or the research student, because we love to print, we love to download, and we love to print. All right, now that is the first common mistake. So you need to make sure first that this paper is the right paper for me to download and for me to print. Right, how to make sure that this is the right paper? All right, I'll tell you later. All right, so if you have made sure that the paper is right, the right one, by reading the abstract actually, now you have a stack of paper for note taking. So you have to do, you print and you do the note taking. All right, so it is reading a paper is actually a very difficult task. All right, it requires few things. All right, it requires commitment. When you're reading your paper, make sure you turn off your computer, you turn off your mobile phone, and if possible, be in a quiet condition. Most importantly, turn off your WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram, because it should not take more than 20 minutes for you to skim the paper. Right? So that's what the first thing you should do is to skim through the paper. Now, what is skimming? Right? Skimming means to go a brief reading. That is, right, read whether the abstract is closely related, right? And then read the introductions. What do you want to look at the introduction section is basically to read what is the contribution that this paper is expected to give, right? And then you can jump straight away to the summary, the conclusion, where it summarizes the contribution and the impact of the paper to the areas. All right. So that is the three. And then once you're done with it and you feel that, okay, I can proceed with it, then only you read critically. Now, the most important thing is what happened after that. If you don't do this, at the end of the day, you will forget. So you would have to do, what you have to do is put the paper aside, all right? Put the paper aside, have some thought, right? Have some thought. How is this paper related to your work? And read, and now you have to, whatever you have in mind, put it in word as sufficient or as detailed as you can recall, right? as detailed as you can, and then come back to that paper probably 1 or 2 days after and look whether your notes is relevant or not. All right, whether you are still missing some points or not. So in other words, after you have justified that this is a very important paper, this very suitable paper, you have to read it twice to remember, right? So not all paper that you would have to read twice. Most paper you ended up reading only once, but important paper you have to read twice. So that's why what I said just now, you have to read a lot, right? You have to read a lot. Okay, the second thing when it comes to reading, and I strongly recommend students to do this, is that to use a reference manager tools. Now, seriously, it saves life. All right. Whoever is not using this, you are doing your research back in 1940s or 50s. All right. And it is mandatory to all my PhD students and my research student, or even my master project student, because there's no way that you can keep your to manage your reference nowadays. Now in the 1940s or 50, when people are doing research, if you look at the thesis back in 1940s and 1950s, they probably have 50 or 30 reference lists, because at that time getting a paper is very difficult. I remember my supervisor says, and he was doing his PhD back in 70s. And he says that, Hazarina, if I can get a paper, one paper for a day, I am absolutely delighted, because the process of getting a paper is going to the library, searching through the catalog, requesting for the librarians to search for the paper, and voila, you get a paper, right? But if you see at the research contact nowadays, you have just to do a quick search. And if your university has a comprehensive database, that comes in second. So you can see the trend of a PhD students nowadays. They have around 40, 30 pages of references page. Okay, so that is the things that they cite in the thesis. They probably read more. So seriously, I would suggest you to use a reference manager, right? If you have not started doing this, you better get started doing now. All right, and I think there's many, but two of my favorite is EndNotes and Mendeley, right? Because basically in a database that it automates the bibliography, and you can choose different format, right? Some journals require MLA, some journals require APA5, so you can just Swift. So it saves lives, right? I call it a lifesaver. All right. The second element that we need to know is about doing the experiment or data collection in our context of social scientists. Now, it is very good, it's very important when you want to embark into a data collection to go back to your research framework. And I think research framework is very fundamental in any research work. All right. So this is the difference between a postgraduate studies and a undergraduate studies. You are expected to conduct the research in a scientific manners. So meaning that it is something that is planned, it is something that follow a protocol. You can't simply say, I want to interview this guy and I want to interview this group, right? It has to be formulated in a research framework. And I'm sure in your university, like any other university, you would have to go a proposal defense session where examiner will ask about the validity of the frameworks and so on, right? So that's the experiment. And when you collect your data, the most important thing is to document, to document, to document, and to document, right? Do not wait until the end. Particularly if you are doing interview, the moment you completed your interview session, please do your transcript. I would say almost immediately. Because once you procrastinate, you compile your interview session, you would spend I don't know how many hours listening over and over again to the interview transcript, and you will get, oh my god, why I'm doing this, right? So, and also if you are doing a survey, it's very important for you to keep log of all the records. I'm sure you use SPSS or Excel, right, or any software to record your survey, but the survey itself must be kept well. I mean, the survey sheet, right? In some examiners, they would request to see that, right? Can I see your survey? Can I see the survey that has been circled by, not answered by the respondent? So keep it nicely, all right? So keep a log of everything that you have done. When did you collect? What time? How many people you get in a session, for example? Okay, so you do not know, sometimes you want to use this data for future collaboration or even for future publication. This some journal might require this. All right, and very often sad cases that I have in my graduate school where students come out and to appear in my office saying that, prof, can I have an extension to submit my thesis because I lost my data and I do not have any backup. Now just like stare you, how are you going to collect your data again when you do not have any backup? All right, even if you have a backup in different compartment in your computer, you need to have a backup in different outlets. All right, use because your computer might be stolen, your computer might crash, so use your Google Drive. If you have some extra money, you might want to buy Dropbox or any other cloud, all right, storage, because you do not know, things might happen, and this always happen. All right, we hope that we do not be the unfortunate one, but there are real cases happens. So I do not want you to rewrite or having to recollect the data or restructure your thesis again just because you fail to have a backup, right, of your data. All right. The third element that we're going to look is the element of publishing your work. All right. Okay. This cartoon is showing to you the process of peer review. When this scientist is planning to submit the paper, the manuscript here, right? These are the reviewer who will, batch you and say that, okay, you have to do corrections, you have to do revisions, and so on. So this is not normal process. All right. So I would recommend you to start to publish early. You can start by, if you have done a good literature review, you can start with a meta-analysis paper or a review paper. All right, and it would be good if you have fundings to go for a conference, and some conference provide an upgrade from a conference paper to a journal publication, right? And you need to plan ahead. My supervisor always tells me that you always need to have something in the pipeline, right? Not in the bag, but in the pipeline, meaning that the process of writing is a continuous writing. So I would always ask my PhD students, what do you have in your pipeline in terms of your writing nowadays and now, right? There must be a paper that the student is currently working on, right? In my experience now, I have completed the supervision of almost 13 PhD, 15 PhD students, right? In my experience, if you do the minimal by continuously having something in the pipeline, you get 2 journal paper. All right, from day one, if you continuously work on writing for a paper publication, at the end of the 4 years, you would usually have 2 in your bag, right? Some students are lucky, right? They might have 3 or 4, but the minimum is basically 2 journal publication. Not talking about conference publication, you probably have more, right, for your conference publications. So when sending to journal is basically very important to send it for a good review journal. Why? Because a good review basically send it to a good reviewer, and this reviewer will basically provide some critics, and then they provide some suggestions on how to improve the paper, and it will basically help the paper to become more well designed, all right, more appropriately designed and analyzed, and eventually it will be very well documented, right? So that's the important thing of sending to good journals, but it's tough because, right, the acceptance rate is usually very low. It's around 20% of the total submission in a year. Okay, so that is being rejected is okay. It is okay. Being accepted with major correction is alhamdulillah. All right, because you still have chance to improve, right? Just I would just tell my students, just go and revise because somebody is checking for free. All right, and if you have accepted with minor correction, I think you can start to prepare for celebration. And I have an experience, one of my paper that I have published, that I've sent, and it was accepted overnight, and it was accepted without any correction. So it happens, right? So that has happened overnight for a Q1 journal. So that was my PhD paper. So Alhamdulillah, and an experience, I had experienced rejection. So a lot of students get very frustrated when their paper get rejected. Don't worry, you are among the 80%. All right. So there are thousands of journals outside there. So just pick one, and inshallah, at least one journal will accept the publication outlet. All right. What do people look at? Well, it's an equal percentage, I would say. All right. It happens to us. Sometimes we feel that how come this paper get published? Right? Because of luck, because of proper writing, because of proper presentation, because of perhaps novelty, although not perfect, but it's something that is new, right? So these are some of the reasons why people get accepted. And a lot of students tend to confine their understanding. When I say an article, they always confine to a full length article, which is that 15 pages. But that's not all about publication. So you can publish a conceptual paper, you can publish a review paper, you can use a research notes, which is a smaller size, all right? And preliminary study results, and also containing a final results, not paper that contains final results. Now, this is my students, all right? She published a research note. So research note is smaller. It's around 7 page. Well, it's tough actually to squeeze your research into 5 to 7 page because we tend to write long, all right? And we feel that we looks very scholar if we write long paper. All right, but that's not the case. Try publishing a research note. You will know how tough to squeeze your research into a smaller number of words, right? This is my friend as well. She opted for a research note. This is not from my university, but she's my friend in another university in Malaysia. What I'm trying to show in this paper is that this is a paper that is accepted for novelty, right? Because this paper is a study by his students, and he uses a qualitative inquiry for a conservative society, meaning that to conduct an interview with this society, it requires a special techniques. All right, a special tribe in Yemen, where it's very difficult to assess, and they are very bound to some cultural restrictions. So how do you deal with this? So this is an example of paper that is being accepted for novelty, for the element of novelty. All right. So maybe you can have something related to Indonesia, because Indonesia is culturally diverse. So maybe there's certain approach that certain group of people in Indonesia that has to be approached in a different way. You can't use the stereotype data collection procedure, right? Uh, this is an example of paper that is being accepted. Well, there's website adoption is not new, but in some country like in Iran, where internet adoptions is new, then this become a contribution. Okay, so you have to put it in your own context on how to sell their paper. All right, so this is some of my recommendation. You have to select from reputable and high quality journals. I would suggest you to look at your journal website. You have to look at some of the ethical principle, right, when you publish, because once you violate this, you probably subject to some of legal offense, such as plagiarisms and so on, right? And some university are very concerned about the impact factor or the quartile of the journal. And also you might want to look at several directories such as Ulrich series directory, where it lists where it describes whether the publication is a referred journals or not. Okay, so these are some of the issues in publications that we have when we handle postgraduate students. The issue of authorships, all right? Should I put my supervisor's name first, or should I put my name first? Right? So what's the rules there? Anybody has an idea? A lot of journal would say that would depends on the contribution of the author. The author that contributes a lot would be the first author. So in my university, if it's a student's research work, the student's name should come first, because most of the work are done by the students, and then followed by the supervisors, right? And also it says about dual publications, which means that you use or recycle the same publication in different outlets. You just tweak a few things and then you publish in another journal. So that's violating the copyright, because once you publish a copyright form of copyright agreements, right? And there's also issue on falsification or fabrications or manipulations of data. So be very careful of it, right? We also have some cases where we had one case last year where we found that there is an issue of fabrications of data. For example, the students told that he collected 300, whereas he only collected 150, and a double up of 150 is just a copy paste from the in the SPSS. So that is fabrication of data, right? And also we are talking about plagiarisms, talking about recycling of text, privacy and confidentials, and so on. So these are some of the issues that we need to observe where we do our writing. And finally is the issue of networking, right? Well, I don't know about well, I'm sure every university would encourage this, that you have like what we have now, REST to SEP, okay, where students join groups and then they have coffee breaks and then they talk about their research. So we usually have this in my university. It depends on the faculty. So it's always good to have connection network within the researcher in the universities. But it's also very good if you can have the opportunity to attend conferences where you can mingle around with students and researcher from other universities, other countries. Okay, and I always tell my students, when I bring one or two of my PhD students in any conference, I would say, you don't have to be shy. All right, they are all PhD students. They are all people that they don't eat peoples, right? Okay, so just get along, mingle together, and just throw a topic. So that is what I mean by networking helps to improve the interpersonal skills, right? And just talk to a professor. So far, I do not, in my 22 years of teaching career, I don't know any supervisor, any professors that eat people. So they are obviously very fine people, and they're very nice people. So you can just talk and say hi, right? And it will be, although some professor might be boring, but then you can always say hi. All right. Okay, and well, if you have opportunity, you might want to choose for a research visit, for an internship, for an exchange study, right? So that some universities provide this. Okay, so you can get some insights about what's happening, right? But it's also a lot of students would have constraint related to this about the time of the study. And yeah, in some university they have research group, and some supervisor form their own research group, right? Now it's become easier with WhatsApp, and now you have different group. So the purpose of a research group is basically to get perhaps a good way to get information and to share informations, right? So you can share informations about conference, you can share informations about if you wanted to apply for internship and so on. So that's very good, all right? And in conclusion, what I would say that it's always good to make a clear plan about what you want to do in your PhD, right? I always say to my student in my first meeting that what do you plan to do? How many times, how long do you have to complete? And like some of the sponsored students say that I only have 3 years, right? So we have to make it clear, right? Since you have only 3 years, then you might not be able to do internship and so on. So we might focus on only these two, for example. Well, I have my PhD student who now is 58 years old, and he's doing his PhD just for seeking of knowledge. So I can't push him too much, right? I just would have to bear with him and be very slow and steady, okay? So he's enjoying the academic journey. So it's fine. So you just need to be very clear about what is the plan, right? And finally, these are all the research process. And I think if you follow this, inshallah, you can get your research done. All right, just a general advice, conclusion advice is that whenever you are meeting your supervisor, I would highly recommend you to have a meeting agenda. And I always ask my students to have this. What is the agenda of our meeting? Otherwise, it will be just a sweet talk and a coffee talk. All right. Okay. Please update your supervisor about what have you done since the last meeting. And today, I would like to discuss about this. So usually supervisor, I think a lot of supervisor have a very restricted time because they would have to do the teaching, they have their own research requirements to do. So start your meeting with your supervisor by saying that this is what I have done since our last meeting. Right? I would like to update you. This is what I have done since our last meeting. And today I would like to ask you these three questions that I hope I can clarify so that I can proceed with my research. Right? And do note taking because it's very difficult to repeat. All right? Idea comes only once. And supervisor speaks very fast, right? And you asked me to repeat, I would say, I don't remember. It just come once, right? I think you better record it next time. I would say to my students like that a lot of times. And that's why I say you want to keep the minutes of the meeting, which means you do the note taking of it, right? And besides that, some students brave enough, they would like to take extra. This is good if, particularly if you are planning to become an academician at the end of your after your studies, right? Take the opportunity. If your supervisor has a paper to review, sometimes they would just give you a flavor on how to become a reviewer, and they would just throw. "Okay, do you want to try to review this paper? Could you please provide a review of this paper?" All right. So try it, and you will get a sense of how a reviewer looks like in a paper. Okay, and if you are a PhD student, you might want to mentor a master students, right? Or be a buddies lah to younger researcher. Okay, and if possible, you just want to add up to good CVs that you go for teaching assistants. All right. Okay, and this is very important. I think above all, this is very important. A lot of people associated PhD or research with permanent head damage. Well, true, perhaps. Okay, it could be a very hectic, right, process. 3 years could be a very daunting and hectic. But I would always say that it is not everything about PhD is not everything. There's so many things in life that you need to cater. The only things that you need to do is to balance. So take care of your family. You need to have family time, right? Do have some hobby, whether you want to do music, you want to do arts or anything, but you need to make your life balance, right? This is important, okay, for our mental health as well, right? Study shows that 40% of PhD students suffers from mental health illnesses. So I don't want you to fall into this population. So get a life outside your PhD, and you must do that. Okay. So I think that's end my session. I'm exactly 2 minutes away from 1 minute, 1 hour. So thank you very much to Dr. Fenty and Nastiti for the introducing me just now. So back to you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hazarina. So the explanation that she gave us previously is really, really informative. As for postgraduate students, sometimes we get lost. We don't know where to start. We never know how to adapt with new type of life, because usually in the undergraduate, maybe we are getting guidance from our advisor, but when we are going to the postgraduate stage, we are not getting any advice at all. So it's like your own survival time. So a lot of things I have noted here is very useful for our journey throughout the postgraduate study. So now I think it's time for the question and answer session. So if any participant want to ask anything related to the lecture, please raise your hand if you want to ask directly to Professor Nur Hazarina, or you can try to write it down in the chat box, or maybe put it in the Google sheet, Google form that has been sent in the chat box, the link. So wait a second, I will check. Okay. Well, actually, I got a question from the Google form, there's a question related to motivation. I think this is really important. The question is coming from Zenda Merkita Firdaus. She is an Institute Teknologi 10 November student, I think. um, she asked about how we can motivate ourselves to do thesis progress every day. She added a set emoticon. Maybe she is feeling unmotivated at the moment. Okay, please, Professor Nur Hazarina.
Okay, keeping motivated is always very tough, actually. I mean, to be honest, I think it's very tough. And if you understand the concept of motivation, it doesn't go skewed up all the time. It goes like this, it fluctuates. So it's okay if you are sometimes down, right? Or you feel that you're kind of lost, but you can't be there for too long. Okay, so how to keep yourself motivated? If you're asking me about writing, take a small bit every day. Now, I do this and I recommend my students, PhD student, to continue to write one paragraph every day. And this is in terms of your writing. Okay, I'm not sure about your situation at the moment, but if you feel like you need to take a break, it's okay, right? End of the semester where you feel fatigued, all right, take maybe a weekend and do crazy things, do something which is outside your PhD, right? And then come back feeling fresh. Look at what you have write out earlier, and then probably you will start to tweak. That's the first thing. The second thing to keep you perhaps motivated is perhaps to get someone that you can rely on to just take a look and then provide. Don't ask them, how does this writing looks like. No, they will start to ask you, I don't understand what you are writing, and then you feel motivated. No, you just ask them a questions that things like, how do you think that I can improve this? I just want to hear suggestion, right? I don't want to hear critics, but can I have your suggestion on how I can improve this paper? So it should be a suggestion, not a comment or critic. That's what I did to my husband when I forced him. He's from engineering and I'm from social science. And I did that. And I did that to all my PhD students. And I say, you throw this manuscript 1 or 2 pages to perhaps your closest friend, your BFF, or your husband, or your whoever, your mother, and just say that, Mom, how can I improve this paper? Your mom would say things like, I think it would be good if you have something here. I think this is a bit jumpy, right? This idea is a bit, there's a gap here. I don't understand what does this abbreviation means, all right? So the whole thing is for you to keep motivation. There's 2 things. First is you need to you need to rejuvenate sometime. If really you're feeling tired, and we are human, we are not machine. Even machines collapse if it works non-stop. So if you need times to rejuvenate, take a little bit of break during the weekend and do something else besides your PhD. Second is that you need someone to provide you recommendations on how to improve, not to condemn. That's why the right question must be asked. How can I improve this? Not what do you think about this? All right. So when you think, how do you think about this? People might give you a negative or non-constructive comments, right? So I hope I answer your question.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nur Hazarina. What about who is? Oh, yeah, Zenda. Zenda, are you here? Is that clear enough or motivate enough for you? Zenda?
Yeah, thank you for this suggestion, ma'am.
Okay. It's nice to hear your voice.
Yeah.
Hi, Zenda.
Hi. So cute.
Okay. Next question. I will take it from the chat box. There is a question from Pasuki DMT. So, wait a minute. Glad to get knowledge in researcher. Anyway, what do you think becoming a researcher if I'm not a teacher or I am a practitioner?
If I understand your question correctly, is that you are not an academician, lah, but you are doing your research at the moment, and you want to continue to become a researcher. Is that
Basuki?
what Basuki means?
Yeah, we should ask him then. Basuki?
Ma-
Yeah.
Yes, it's the correct. That's the correct part. So as a non-academic research, and then I'm only a practitioner. So what do you think about the? I had to perform the dissertation. Thank you.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, you are working in a researcher environment, but you are a practitioner. Is that right? And you have to conduct the research among them. Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so you're a research officer. Okay, I think that's quite common where you ended up to become a researcher, all right, after completing your doctoral degree or master by research. And I think that's good. I like the idea as a matter of fact because a lot of the common connotation is that once you completed your degree, your postgraduate degree, whether your master's or your PhD, is that you will turn to be an academic staff. I think that's very narrow, okay, and I highly encourage for the people from the completed their postgraduate study to join the industry as the researcher. I think that's very good. It's not necessary that you have to end it up in an academic fields. Okay, I see one question here. How
Yeah.
to keep your research topics simple but worthy enough for a PhD thesis? Okay, a PhD requirement is to have a contribution to knowledge, right? That is among the most accepted term for a PhD degree. Okay, the student should be able to show to the examiner that the research has at least a contribution to knowledge. Now, the term itself is very vague because a contribution to knowledge could have different interpretation and different expectation of reviewer and examiners. Okay, for example, if I'm giving, would like to give you an example. If you are conducting a study in a study that focus on Indonesia, you might think that that is a great contribution to your country, but examiner might say that that's a replication of studies. Well, I don't see much contributions on that. Well, in a PhD study, the most important thing, in my opinion, and in supervising students and examining the thesis, is that you should be able to relate the contribution of the study to any single academic discipline or topic. All right, it could be simple, but you should be able to justify that having a contribution to specific academic knowledge. For example, so it could be like, but then if you are choosing a simple when you say simple, I'm not sure what you mean by simple, but if I'm assuming simple is a commonly discussed topic, like for example, the one I show you just now, destination marketing. When I say destination marketing, a lot of you might can guess it's probably related to how do we market a destination, all right? So I'm not sure what you mean by simple, but if simple means a widely known topic, still what we look at is how this topic adds to the existing knowledge, additional knowledge in certain academic field, right? So I mean the word simple here in the question is a bit is where is wide, and it could be widely discussed lah. Probably will take another hours to discuss on that. Okay, and then there's another question from student here. I recently finished a research that the students also presented in an international conference. Now is writing an extended abstract. How to search or what to consider in looking for the most suitable platform to publish. Okay, in determining what is the most suitable platform to publish, I think the most suitable platform after you have presented in the conference is a journal platform. But I think the question here is more of what type of journals and what outlet that I can use to determine which journal that is most suitable to my field. Well, this is where I think that library in the university plays a role. Every university, I think, has a library that subscribe to Scopus or Web of Science Index. All right. From there, if you are looking for a Scopus journal, then you can just search from the Scopus database what journals that is listed in Scopus. I would recommend for a PhD level, which I believe it has contributions to knowledge, it should be able to penetrate a web of science at least, right? But if you're working on a master's project or a master's dissertation, a master by research, you may target Scopus platform, which is more, uh, they have a higher number of journal in the collections compared to the Web of Science, right? I'm sure in ITS they have this service.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for answering two questions, I think, from the chat box. Now we have other questions from the Google form. First is coming from Nur Amira from University Malaysia Sarawak. There are two questions. So first question is, does my postgraduate degree have to be related to my undergraduate degree? And then the second one is how to start a postgraduate study.
The answer is no. Your undergraduate does not necessarily has to have a link with your postgraduate study. Okay, there's a lot of professor who have this. All right. There is a professor in Hong Kong where I know that his undergraduate is in astronomy, something like that, and then he turned on to be a tourism researcher. Okay, and he did very well. Okay, and then the second question was it? Sorry, just now I kind
How
of.
to start a postgraduate study.
Okay. Well, in how to start a postgraduate study, well, that's broad. Okay, in postgraduate study, they have three major. You can first, I think you should decide whether you want to pursue your postgraduate study in a research track, where you would have to work on research, or a coursework mode lah, where you enroll in a class. I think this is the first thing that you would have to decide. Which track do you want to choose? A research track or a taught course or mixed mode track? Once you have select this, then you have to choose the course of your interest, lah, right? And make sure, I think for all admissions and requirement and postgraduate, there is a CGPA or working experience outlined from there. So I think for the person who asked the question just now, I think it's very important for you first to decide on the track that you want to choose, right? Are you going to become a researcher, or you wanted to complete by sitting in courses, okay, for your masters?
Yeah. So the main point is finding the passion, right? Because
Yes, correct.
it's going to be a tough journey. So if you don't have the passion, then you will get lost in the middle.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
So next, there is a question again in the Google form from Dwi Rahayu Amini. So the question is, how do we evaluate the journal that we are going to submit for publication or conference? Is it good or not to be accepted by the committee and reviewers? Do you have any suggestions related to that matter?
Okay, the question was, how do you evaluate the journal?
Yes.
Right? How do I evaluate the journal? I would, in my, I think in most postgraduate students' cases, is that it will depends on the requirement of your university. Of course, we say a good journal would be a journal that has a higher rank. And how do you calculate? How do you evaluate the rank? Is usually by looking at the quartile or the SNP number, SNIP, the SNP number of the journal. All right. This is one of the good indicator lah, that we can use to evaluate whether the journal is a good journal or not. right? At least journal that is listed by Scopus is also good. The one that I do not recommend students to send is like the open access bogus journal. All right, there we can question on the credibility of the publisher. Right. So if you have heard about Bill list of predatory journal, so these are some of the journal that you would avoid, right? Otherwise, I think how do you know? I would advise you to go to Web of Science database or Scopus database.
Okay, now I think we have other question in the chat box from Pudrunesa in Bangladesh. As I am very beginner in this field, is there any importance of focusing on writing style? I mean to say, should it be always formal or can I use some metaphorical words in it?
Well, I like this question. It's very different. Academic writing is very different than general writing, right? I I I have a student who worked previously in journalism. Okay, she's having difficulty as well to tune in her writing to academic writing. So how if you're a beginner, there's no shortcut, but to continue and to practice doing academic writing day by day. So that's why I would advise you just now to continue to write because there is a different in academic writing, and of course metaphorical words are something that we avoid when we do academic writing. So we don't use all these metaphorical flowery words or very full with adjective, right? We kind of straightforward and very concise in academic writing.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hazarina. I think there are no more questions. I will give you time for asking question once again for the second batch. To the participants, you can write it down or directly raise your hand and then we will give you the access to speak, or maybe submit it in the Google form that we have been given in this chat box. So I think I have a question related to the reading a lot because that's the first thing that we have to do as a postgraduate student. That is reading a lot. In you mentioned before that reading a lot means not simply only reading but also explain and criticize. I think what the difficulties is about criticizing a paper or anything that we read. How can we construct those critical thinking in our mind so that whenever we read something then we can try to criticize it, I mean put it improve constructive criticism. So that's become the biggest question maybe for the postgraduate students. So um, whenever some at the beginning of my postgraduate study as well, I start to read a lot, but criticizing is another thing which is really hard. So how we construct those type of thinking to our daily reading?
I think that there are internal and also external factor that can help you in this. Internal factors come from yourself. That after all, we need to create self awareness that when we read, we start to ask questions whether is this make sense, all right? Am I doing what is so great about the research? Is there any limitations, right? We questions ourselves on this, all right? And another thing that is very important to observe, okay, speaking from us, from the Asian background, I think we are taught on the culture that we don't ask questions that much, right? We are taught about being receptive, and we receive, and we agree. We tend to agree with. We tend to be taught to agree with what other people says, especially if that other people is older than us, senior than us, right, highly reputable than us. We don't question. This is one of the culture. I think upon supervising students right? And upon being supervised by people from different culture, I see this. We are quite shy not to critics people, particularly Asian like us. We are quite shy actually. Part of that is because our culture. So I think this is what I mean by the internal factor that we ourselves have control. We need to start to develop the skill of a researcher where we need to ask questions. At least what I usually do when I'm having this problem in the beginning of these studies, and also discover this with a lot of postgraduate students, is that once they finish, they're happy that they understand, right? What happened to a lot of students is that they completed reading the article, and they are happy when they understand, and they stop, right? And I always push my PhD student in our meeting and the discussion, and I always push the question by asking, what do you think is the problem with this research? I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure there is always a venue to improve. So I throw questions. And I understand that not all supervisor would have a dedicated time to ask questions on this. If you happen to have a very busy supervisor, then throw these questions to yourself. Or maybe you have a circle of group, then that group can help you. But these are what I call external factor that could be a bit difficult for you to control. But our internal factor is that we have to move on, all right, at this level as a postgraduate student, to move on from being happy, but when understanding, be able to understand, to be able to question, which is like, what is the limitation? How can I improve this paper? I think these two questions are basic questions to ask.
Okay, thank you. That's a very on point answer. Because it happens maybe not only to us, maybe to Professor Nur Hazarina as well in the beginning, and other scholar here maybe at the beginning always trying to be critics, but how do we start to be critic? So okay, I think wait a minute. Okay, there is no more questions in the Google form and also in the chat box. I think that's all for today. Thank you for giving us a very precious lecture and tips. I would like to make a general resume from your lecture. So there are 4 elements that is really important for us to conduct our postgraduate study. So first is reading a lot, and then second is data collection or fieldwork, and then the third is publication, and the last one is networking. So based on these 4 elements, I hope that we can survive, because I haven't been in the PhD level. So maybe I hope for myself that I can survive. And then also you mentioned about a very useful website for all researchers, I think, which is lens.org. I would like to remind you all to check out the website as well to help us to understand the topic that is becoming a trend topic during our research, so that we can give a contribution to our body of knowledge. I think that's all. Thank you, Professor Nur Hazarina, for giving us a very on-point tips and also information related to postgraduate study. I think I will give the time to Miss Nastiti.
Hello. Thank you so much for the wonderful session to Professor Nur Hazarina and also Ibu Fenty. I'm happy. I would like to say I'm happy because there are so many questions and the participants were not shy in showing what they feel nervous about starting a PhD or starting a master's degree. So thank you for the wonderful session again to Professor Nur Hazarina and also Ibu Fendi. Now we would like to show appreciation. We have a small souvenir for both the speaker and also the moderator. We would like to. Okay, so this is a certificate of appreciation for Associate Professor Nur Hazarina Hashim as the speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's still loading. Ah, finally. Thank you. And then this is the certificate of appreciation to Ibu Fenty Ratna Indarti as the moderator for today's session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, now that we have come to the end of the session, I'd like to invite all of you to turn on your camera. Let's have a photo session. Please turn on your camera. I will check in the gallery. Okay, I think many of you have started the camera. Okay, so please share your best smiles for 5 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Probably once again. 1, 2,
Please wait.
4. Okay, I'll recount. 1,
Please wait.
2, 3, 4, and 5. Thank you so much for sharing your best.
Thank you so much to ITS. I do hope that the session is beneficial to all. So thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Professor Nur Hazarina, for becoming our speaker for this session. I believe many of the postgraduate students feel happy and satisfied with today's session. You opened their mind and expectation on what to do for the whole period of learning. So I would like to thank you again to the speaker and also the moderator. Thank you for the empowering contribution. And also thank you to all the participants for participating actively. I think I got a problem with my microphone. And also to the committee. Thank you for running this program well and for the good preparation. So, bye-bye and see you in 2 weeks at Art Recipe for Architecture, Urban Planning, Design and Social Science stream with the topic of Finding Research Idea. It will run on Thursday, April 8, 2021 with Associate Professor Rosilah Jamil from University Technology Malaysia. So this is the poster, and if you miss any of our information, don't hesitate to visit our Instagram account and also visit our web as we have shared in the chat box. So thank you so much once again, and until the next meeting. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much, Prof. Hazarina and also Ibu Fenty. Thank you, Dr. Asriana Irfansyah, Dr. Abdiana Yadi, and all the committee. To the host, I believe it's Pak Bagus Jati. Thank you so much, Papa. Could you
Okay.
please end the session in 1, 2, 3? Time is yours. See you again.